Hello, students. Mr. Alexander here. I'm going to talk about some test preparation outside of school. Right, we think that tests eventually stop and end, but for various jobs, as you can see on the slide here, you'll need to either continue certification, get certified, continue having your license, get your license, and tests really never go away. But we can definitely prepare for them and be successful in life. Here we have an example. Right, when we look at some of our tests in school usually are designed to resemble tests you might see. So even though the content might be different, the format, the wording, and the structure of the test is going to be the same. So on our left here, we've got a high school biology test. And on the right, we have a barber or cosmetology license exam. So as you can see, multiple choice, asking someone, if they know the proper terms, knowing definitions, are all things you're going to need to know for various tests. Another example, we have a high school math test, and then we have a HVAC exam. So being able to process words, being able to process and look at practicing certain skills or procedures, right? Your teachers are teaching you things of how to, systematically go through a question. You're going to need to know that stuff in real world when you apply it to a job such as heating and ventilation, air conditioning, and things like that. Last one is a high school ELA test, and then a plumber licensing exam, excuse me. But understanding a concept and applying it. So, a lot of times people think that, oh, when am I going to use this in the real world? You may not use that actual information, but the process of understanding the information, the process of reading something, the process of being taught something is something that you're going to end up using once again if you go on to get a license in, for example, being a plumber, electrician, things like that.
So I'm Mr. Jordan, and
I'm Mr. Wisard,
I teach history.
and I teach chemistry.
So what we want to talk a little bit about is specific techniques for preparing for tests. And really, when you're preparing for a test, there's really three things that you're doing with information. For one thing, you're gathering information, and then you're organizing information, and then you're studying the information. So gathering information, successful students are gathering information every day. That's what you do in class. That's by being an active listener, taking notes when you need to be taking notes, practicing skills and techniques when you're doing that. That's what you're doing when you're gathering information. And then you can organize the information to make it make sense to you. And I can promise you a couple of things. Number one, if you get to the last day or two before a test, there's no amount of studying that can be done to make up for an entire unit's worth of gathering information. If you haven't been gathering information, if you haven't been doing that day-to-day work, there's no amount of studying that'll work in the last couple of days to help you be successful on a test. And if you've organized the information in advance, you're going to find that the studying is a lot less stressful and a lot easier. And that's why we recommend that you do something called the study cycle. Mr. Weiser is pretty passionate about the study cycle, so we're going to let him talk about it.
So as you looked at that study cycle, the first thing on there was preview. And the preview is really twofold. Your teacher can be in charge of the preview part, or if you have a syllabus for an entire unit or an entire semester or with a calendar, you can see what's coming and look at it ahead of time. Or your teacher might say, hey, tomorrow we're going to be looking at section 1 of chapter 3. So the preview is get in section 1 of chapter 3 or online or whatever your teacher gives you to look ahead at what's coming tomorrow. What it does is it literally primes your brain for the information that's coming. And especially if it's new vocabulary. You may not on your preview know what the vocabulary is, but on the next day when the teacher brings it up in class, now you go, oh, I saw that last night in my preview. You're ready for it. You see it, you know what's coming, and it makes it less new in class because you've already seen it, not necessarily have it down pat, but you're a little bit familiar with it, which all kinds of educational research shows improved cognitive ability with that material. Secondly on here, is attending. And attending is twofold, right? There's actually coming out, sitting in the class and being there, being present, but it's also about being mentally present. It's participating. It's actively asking questions. It's putting yourself there, not just physically, but mentally. Am I engaged with the material? That way you make more connections in your brain and you can come up with applying that material to new situations because you've already had extreme focus on what you're doing. Now, this second part, this daily review, oftentimes students get review and studying confused. Mr. Jordan's going to talk about studying here in a couple minutes, but the studying is what you do before the test. The review is something you do every day. Look at the title of the slide, daily review. And what this is, oftentimes in class, you are going to learn something for the very first time in your life. And it might be coming at you fast. It might be something brand new. It might have all kinds of new vocabulary that as you're sitting in class, it's not going to register to you right now. And you might just be randomly scribbling down your notes, trying to get everything that's part of the class discussion. And you're not really internalizing that. So what do? As soon as you can after that class. It might be if you have study hall next period, or lunch in 2 periods, or after school, or right after practice that night. Get that material out again and look at it now. And if it's your notes and they're sloppy and disorganized, rewrite them, reorganize them. Just read them again and go, oh, I remember when we said that in class today. Now I'm looking at it a second time and I get it. Or, you know what, I really don't get this. And that's my clue to talk to teacher the next day to say, hey, we did this yesterday and I'm just not square with it. So that review part is probably the most important part to this entire process because it's daily and it's frequent. Mr. Jordan.
So what we want you to get out of this is the idea that test preparation is not something that you only do in the day before the test or the hours before the test or a few days before the test. Test preparation is something that's sort of ongoing. You're from the day that a new unit begins until the day of the test, you're doing test preparation if you want to be successful at it. Now, on the other hand, in the handful of days before the test, you can kind of intensify your preparation. And that's what we talk about studying, right? Because if you've done all the things that Mr. Wisard was talking about, you have gathered the information you need. You have organized the information. That's what previewing, attending, and doing daily review does for you. So that when you go into that part where you're actually doing the studying for the test, you're all ready to go. But usually there's a lot of material to cover. So what I recommend that you do is that you break down a unit into parts. And generally speaking, I say break it down into 4 parts and then plan on studying for your test over a 5-day period. So let's say that your unit is broken into learning targets. So in this case, 12 learning targets. 2 of them are hidden behind the picture of me and Mr. Wisard. Sorry about that. But let's say you've got 12 learning targets in a unit. But it could be 12 concepts that you have to learn, or 12 chapters of a book that you have to review. You get the idea. So what we do is we break this down into 4 days worth of work. On the first day, take group 1. On the second day, take group 2. On the third day, take group 3. On the fourth day, take group 4. So you're not putting the pressure on yourself to try to do all of it all in one night, because that can lead to all sorts of stress and anxiety that you don't need. So what I recommend is take those first 3 learning targets, take those first 3 concepts, take group 1, and 5 nights before the test, okay, sit down and write out responses to those learning targets, or write out a definition of those concepts. Or if it's a set of skills that you need to perform, like math problems or balancing chemistry equations, do some samples. Do some sample problems, balance some sample equations. That's night 1, all right? On night 1 with group 1, you write out your responses. On night 2, review the responses that you did yesterday, and then write out new responses for group 2. On night 3, review the responses from group 1 and group 2, and write out responses for group 3. On night 4, review the responses for groups 1, 2, and 3, and write out responses for group 4. You see, what this does for you is it makes sure that by the time you get to the night before the test, which is going to be night 5, you've already gathered and organized the information, and you have reviewed a lot of it multiple times already. So that by the time you get to night 5, a lot of the stress and a lot of the work is already done for you. So that on night 5, that can be the check. All right. Part of the study cycle is to check for understanding. See if you really know what you're talking about. Has all of this gathering, organizing, and studying of information worked for you? So review all of your responses, whether it's definitions that you've written out or answers to learning targets or sample math problems or chemistry equations, whatever it is. Review all of those responses, and if you can, work with other students to check each other's understanding. Gather in study groups, talk over your responses, quiz each other. You can even use Quizlet. You can create Quizlets for each other. You can try to predict what questions will show up on the test and then give answers to those questions and talk through what those answers should be. So I really encourage you to make it more social, more interactive. Work together with other students and check each other's understanding. And the thinking is that if you do all these things, then by the time it's ready for you to take the test, it won't be such a stressful experience. But here's Ms. McGinnis to talk to you a little bit about the mental side of test preparation.
Thank you. Hi, students. It's Ms. McGinnis, one of your mental health specialists in the building. So we are going to be talking about how tests and anxiety and stress can kind of come together for a lot of students. We have a kind of a graph showing there's an optimal stress level, and then when we get into that orange zone is when things maybe kind of start to plummet a little bit. So sometimes stress or sometimes anxiety can be helpful and kind of push us to do our best. But then when there's too much of that anxiety, it can kind of cause our performance to plummet just a little bit. So doing the tips that were just told to you would kind of help and get you to that tipping point when you know you're prepared and when you know like you've kind of done everything that you can do. That optimal stress level is kind of where you will be. So the last 24 hours before a test, you want to make sure that you're getting a good night's sleep. You want to make sure that you get some rest. And maybe that means like you're doing something before you go to sleep that kind of puts you in a good headspace. Maybe that's spending time with friends or family. Maybe that's listening to your favorite music. Maybe that's taking a bubble bath. Maybe that's doing a coloring page if you like to color, or doing some type of art. And then you also want to make sure you eat before a test. Like make sure your body is fueled. Our minds run off of food. Like our body has to produce energy to go ahead and have us be able to do what we need to do as far as testing and thinking through maybe some more challenging concepts. So we want to make sure our body is fueled. And so just before and during the test, if you're feeling that anxiety, you can do some breathing exercises. Breathing kind of makes your body slow down and kind of gives you a little bit of awareness of what's going on around you. So if your heart is racing a little bit, that breathing might help you bring you back down to, okay, I'm about to test, and get you into a spot where you feel like maybe you're a little more focused. So we have the square breathing technique on the screen. So you can do it in your head, or you could do it, I guess, physically, and draw a square. But you breathe in, and then you hold it, and then you breathe out, and then you hold. And the good thing about this exercise is that you can kind of do it wherever you are, however often you would like to do it, even during the test. So that's good with the square breathing. And then as far as taking 5 breaths. So we have our hand here on the next visual, but you might breathe in here and then breathe out, and then breathe in here and then breathe out, and then breathe in here and then breathe out. And this is also something you might be able to do during the test as well. So those are just some tips and tricks to kind of help your body to relax before you take a test. We hope that this has been helpful and super informative for you guys. Thank you so much for your time and attention.